Hello, hello, everybody. It's Tuesday and it's time for another Artful Leadership Interview series. Hello, hello. Welcome everyone. It's Rochelle from Artful Leadership Coaching and Consulting, and I'm super excited to be back with another episode here on Facebook. And just to give you a little context of what this little interview series is about, it's really about tapping into the wisdom, the stories, and the experiences of folks that are leading artfully through this time, folks who are working at the intersection of the arts, education, social change, and healing, and really following their lead as we're all kind of finding our way through this really crucial time in so many ways. The pandemic is one lens to look through, right? There's so many other things that are happening in our world right now. And I'm a huge fan of the arts and of artists. And I feel like artists make culture and they really teach us how to be in new ways. And that's why I'm really thrilled to have Ramon Absoloot Robinson here today to share a little bit about what he has built with his Absoloot brand. And I've been following him on Instagram for a while and just so inspired by a number of things that he's doing. And so, Ramon, thank you so much for agreeing to hop on today.
Of course, and thanks for that awesome introduction. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Well, Ramon and I were just talking about this is a cool call because we're at like exact opposite ends of the country where I'm in San Diego and he's in Fort Lauderdale. So we've got like all of the US is covered here. We got East Coast, West Coast. We got the whole thing going on. So Ramon, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about kind of, when I was reading your bio, it was talking about how like one of the places where you first got a lot of attention was in this Occupy Wall Street movement, and then how you kind of like ended up going a little bit different direction than maybe that had seemed like you might go, and what you've done since then with your positive hip hop music, with comic books, and you've got a bunch of really beautiful things that you're doing in the community. Tell us a bit about it.
So that Occupy Wall Street kind of happened out of the blue, where we were just creating music, and at that time we were working on an album called Banksters, and we were talking about the financial crisis around 2008 and just how devastating that was for the average person dealing with that. Yeah. And I still feel like this, the media skips over a lot of what people go through on a daily basis, right? And so, as you said, artists kind of touch on that because we're living through these, this atmosphere and these different times, and we get to experience some of the worst of what's going on. And so we talk about that through music. If you're a painter, some of the images that you may paint will have that in it, and you because you take it to heart. I'm a extremely sensitive person, and I think most artists are. And that's why you hear in our music or kind of see in some of the things that we do, what's going on at that current time. Yeah. But we did this song called Banksters, and because it was talking about the financial crisis, somebody wrote an article on it, and it got picked up. It was all over the place, and kind of adopted by some people who were involved in the Occupy Wall Street movement. And that wasn't necessarily where I was going with it. It was just like I wanted to touch on these things, and it's something that I have a lot of experience with it because my parents own this mortgage brokerage company. And so I got to see it like firsthand with some of the people we're going through. My mother has pretty much dedicated her life to helping people find affordable housing. So I've grown up seeing people struggle and then, end up getting homes, and then watching in 2008, and as everybody's losing their homes and people are really struggling really bad financially, the company is shedding 500,000 jobs a month. It was very disheartening because the media talks about it one way, but I always think about that average person. What is that single mother going through? Right. And nobody's really talking to her. Nobody's really comforting her. Nobody's really easing her burden or her pain. And so I make music kind of from that angle, not necessarily a single mother, but somebody who's in that struggle and has to go through that and walk through these communities, seeing things being torn down and people not being able to get jobs regardless whether or not they have a college degree. And so that's what that album was about, and that song getting picked up as part of that movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then what happened after that for you to kind of go, ooh, I want to reach young people in a new way with some of these other avenues that you've been exploring?
Because, you know, as much as you and I may have an idea of where we want things to go, it's the younger generation who's going to take them there.
Yeah.
And the only thing we can do is kind of mentor and help guide them. We have to provide them with as much information as possible. And as I get older, I see there's so much that I'm missing out on, so much information that I was never given, so much that I wasn't exposed to. And I don't want this next generation to come up and miss out on as much as I did. And I think about that all the time, you know, and I always use my daughter as my example. She's like kind of the guinea pig when doing some of these things, but she benefits greatly. And one example is I was definitely afraid of releasing the first book because I'd never released a book before. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know any other authors. I never met another author. Mm-hmm. And so I mean, I was just Googling and on YouTube on how do you release a book and what does it actually mean to publish a book? And then when you write a book, how do you actually go about getting illustrations and, you know, which age range to write it? And there was so much to think about. It was overwhelming. And when I did it, it was like a huge relief. There was really nothing to be fearful of. But I was so scared because I didn't know that realm, you know, when talking about art. And so I sat with my daughter, and one of the first things I want to do is her to write a book and release a book because it was something I was so scared of. I wanted to make sure she doesn't have these fears. Yeah. And so that's something we did together. She sold her books out, and then I was able to teach her some financial literacy things from doing that, some things that I didn't know. And so she was able to set up herself financially and begin doing those things at 8 years old, where, you know, a lot of us are in our 30s or 40s before we start even understanding some of these things. And so I realized that one of the biggest things I can do in making a difference is reaching our youth and teaching them things that I missed out on, you know? And so that's like my main focus is making sure that I reach the youth. And when I mean youth, I'm talking about, you know, 20s, 30s, even 40s, because you really don't hit a peak mentally until you're around your 40s and 50s, right? Right. Because you have to make those mistakes and you have to learn these lessons in order to really get over those fears and everything, you know, that you've built up over the years. You really, it takes time to learn those. And so I'm like, I want to be that helpful hand to our youth. I've been mentoring around that time. I guess it was seen as having, you know, so much success in music and being positive, which a lot of people thought is just, it doesn't make sense. Like if you do hip hop, you have to be negative. I've even heard kids, you know, when we were doing certain classes say, well, if you don't curse, then it's not hip hop, which is, you know, it's crazy because before it was never that. You know? Right. And most people weren't cursing. But I've heard all kinds of things. And so our youth, they usually look at things from the angle that they've been given. They don't realize, you know, they're not media literate, which most adults aren't either. And so I'm like, okay, so how do I educate them? How do I help them? Who can I work with to bring more to them? Mm-hmm. And so my passion is really just making sure that they change the world and I can give them something to help with that. I can help influence and inspire them to do something like that. Yeah. Yeah. So what are the avenues that you're working with young people? You mentioned like courses. Are you collaborating with like youth organizations or like, how does that, or churches or communities? Like how does that work? So yeah, we've actually collaborated with many organizations. I mean, you know, I'm scared to start mentioning names because I know I'm going to forget some. So it's like, you know, I don't want anybody to say, oh, well, we worked with you too. And we really, so my business partner, Brandon Freeney and I, right, we got together and we were like, and he was doing music at the time too. And he owned a studio and he was just like, I love what you're doing with this positive music. We can do more with this, you know? And so we really brainstormed. It was like, how do we take this to that next level? How do we begin partnering with major corporations so that we can get some of these youth access to finances and just resources that they don't have growing up in these communities. Mm-hmm. So we started mentoring with an organization called Men to Boys Mentoring. This is one of the first organizations that I ever mentored with. Mm-hmm. My brother introduced me to the founder, Rick Dunn.
Yeah.
And he was just kind of doing these things from his home because he was like, we have to make a difference. And some of these kids are getting in really bad trouble.
Yeah.
A lot of times just because they don't have anything to do, and then there's no parents in the home, right?
Right.
And Florida has a huge foster care system. So we can't say, well, where are the parents? Because a lot of these youth don't have parents. And it's no fault of their own. It could be a car accident, both parents pass, or one of the parents pass, or cancer. We've seen all kinds of situations where kids are left to themselves, and they're trying to fend for themselves in a world that's really unforgiving.
Yeah.
And so working with Men to Boys Mentoring really, really enlightened me to some of the things that we need as a community.
Yeah.
And so that was really around the time I really just made the turn and started just making all clean, all positive music, doing a lot of work in the community. But that was a really big changing point for me working with Men to Boys Mentoring. And that was like 07, maybe, 08. I'm not exactly sure, but working with them. And then I connected a few years later with AVDA, which is Aid to Victims of Domestic Abuse. And this was the most enlightening experience I've ever had working with a nonprofit organization. And they're based out of Delray. So they're in the Palm Beach County area. Mm-hmm. But understanding oppression is what I began to understand through working with AVDA. Not just domestic violence, but racism and oppression as a whole, and the effects of it and the effects we have on each other. Yeah. And so as I began to become more and more educated in what's actually happening and more literate when it comes to media literacy, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with the music that I initially made. I even removed all of it from the internet. And I was like, I don't even want to be paid for it. I want no association to some of the things that I was saying and some of what I was mentioning, because I understand where that comes from. Yeah. And a lot of that is rooted in oppression. Yeah. And so I didn't want any part of that, because that's what really holds up racism.
Right.
And I was just like, working with AVDA, it was really life-changing to see it from that perspective, because I had never seen it or heard it from that perspective before. And the fight that we look at as a women's fight, which is not, it's men. It's men or those who are being abusive, right? There are some women that deal with that. But really the abuse against women, that's something that men need to be dealing with, not women. And it's something that I was like, well, how do I stand up for women? How do I become an ally instead of somebody who's upholding these oppressive beliefs, the same beliefs that oppress me and others, right? Yeah. And so working with AVDA, life-changing. And then we met with many other organizations. And so we work with quite a few schools. I taught a reading class at Dillard right before the pandemic hit. Mm-hmm. And so we work with, just countless. I've spoken at University of Miami, and we've traveled to Haiti and helped put books in schools. And then we built a computer lab for New Akebalon here in Fort Lauderdale, and using the books and the music to actually give back, right? And so making sure that we can purchase computers with the money that's coming from some of the things that we're doing in the community. But I work with, just countless schools. And so I mentor, I consult. I love doing the music. I write the books, and I work on some graphic design and illustrators. And we just started doing this thing with trading cards. And so I'm all over the place, but it's all around building the community. It's all with the same goal in mind.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because what you're doing reminds me so much of, there's a beautiful organization here in San Diego called David's Heart Foundation. And they are kind of a hip hop based mentoring program. And they work primarily with youth that are systems affected in the juvenile prison settings and also in the community. But there's so much of what you're doing that they're doing too. And it's just so inspiring to me. So I feel like you hit on so many important things in terms of mentorship, in terms of like understanding the conditions that create that the oppressive conditions, right, that impact relationships and the whole dynamic of those things. And I feel like with oppression in terms of domestic violence, it's very similar to racism, right? It's the same thing. It's like we can't expect, like, it's not a Black person's issue. It's a larger, it's a much larger, right? It's like, it's a much larger issue of like these greater conditions. So I really appreciate you speaking to that and how allyship works and really creating meaningful and lasting change. Yeah. So I'm really curious, like what was the pandemic like for you? And like, how did you pivot from, being in classrooms and meeting with folks in person, and how has that shifted for you as an artist at this time?
Well, it's been difficult because I love being around the kids, and so not being around them is like, I think about them every day. What are they up to? Are they okay? Are they staying out of trouble? And just wanting to help them, see things from a different perspective. For instance, financial literacy, wanting to have those conversations with them, but not being able to is a bit difficult. But it also gave me some time to really sit down and work. And one of my favorite things is building. I love building. And when I look at writing a song, it's building. Yeah. For me, I'm building a song from beginning to end. And when I'm writing a book, I'm building out a story and a storyline. And it's so fun to me, that's really been the joy of it. And there is a joy in having that time to really create and really have the time to think and just meditate in what it is that what I want to do. So I've loved that about it. And I still enjoy that, having those moments to where I can really just sit and think and not worry about, I have to go out, I have to perform, I have to talk, I have to do all these things. As much as I want to do them, I know it's important for me to sit down and create, because sometimes it gets to the point where I'll kind of run myself tired. And then I come back and I'm like, I really need to create something. So we started working on some Black history songs. And so I started creating some songs and writing some songs much different than I was previously. And the pandemic has given me the time to really change my thought process when it comes to approaching music. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would imagine that music is going to have, I feel like it's sad that this is where we are. And at the same time, it's the opportunity of the time, right? That people will be more open and interested in this theme, right? Of the Black songs. And I was seeing on Instagram, like your Black history trading cards. Yeah, which I think is very cool too. Like, can you say a little bit about what's that project about?
So one of the things that I realized in many communities, not just the Black community, but in many communities, and I wanted to start in our community just because I wanted to see how people would really hold on to it. Would they appreciate the people in the community if I gave them the opportunity to see these people in a different light? I realized working with some of the kids in one of the schools we were at, my business partner and I, we were creating a comic book with the youth. Mm-hmm. And so they wanted to create a comic book about Martin Luther King. And my business partner and I was like, yeah, that's great, but why don't we give them the opportunity to pick somebody instead of just giving them the same people? I don't want to give them the same people. Right. I want to educate them and then allow them to make a decision with the information that they have. They're in elementary school, so it's like they're sponges, and it's such a beautiful thing when they're so young and they can really soak up information, and you can interact with them, and they have the funniest questions in the world. And so my business partner came with this crazy concept to create a voting system for the fifth graders. And so he built a ballot box and he printed out voting ID cards, and we were poll watchers like he did. It was amazing, right? And we started talking about civil rights and the right to vote. And we really got into that with them. But it was so cool because they could write, their information on the card. They could draw their little face on it. We could laugh, we could joke with each other while still learning. And then we got the candidates. The candidates was Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, George Washington Carver. And so we had our candidates and we gave them information on each candidate. And we spent the day talking about each candidate and the wonderful things that each candidate had to offer to the country, right? And then at the following week was the big vote. And so they all got the vote, they lined up, they all got to cast their votes, and then we tallied the votes. And, you know, we got to hear them out and see why they picked some of these people. And before we even got there, we realized we had to do something like that because we asked who Martin Luther King was and what they knew about him. And a lot of the youth said that he freed the slaves. So they heard the name, but they didn't know who Martin Luther King was.
Right. So they had all their timeline mixed up, right? Yeah,
they had no idea. And it goes to show you that they really weren't being taught that. They were familiar with just the name.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? We have Martin Luther King's right now. We have Rosa Parks right now. We have George Washington Carver right now. It's not a once in history. We have people that are fighting great injustices. We have people that are inventing and doing some amazing things right here in our community. You know, we in Fort Lauderdale, there's a street called Sistrunk, and Dr. Sistrunk sued the state of Florida so that he could practice medicine, opened up the hospital and delivered over 5,000 babies, right? And so you live in a community with a man who did that, who literally changed things and fought to create a system to help others, those who are less privileged, and practice medicine. And the thought of living in a community with somebody like that gives me chills because it's amazing. It's something I couldn't even fathom doing, right? And I was like, well, we have other people in our community. We have Dr. Marcus Davidson, who's a pastor, but also has a feeding program and does so much for the community. And I was like, wow, they could actually talk to Marcus Davidson. He's got degrees, he helps in the community. You can see him out here feeding people. It's one of the largest African-American churches, or the largest African-American church in Fort Lauderdale is New Mount Olive. And he's the pastor of New Mount Olive Baptist Church. And then you have people like Kelvin Watson, who's one of my favorite people. Once I got to know him, he's the director of he was the director, let me say that. He was the director of Broward County Library System. He's now the director for Las Vegas. And so the work that Kelvin Watson has put into becoming the director of, I don't know how many libraries here in just the Broward County area, and the amount of educational programs and job placement programs that he's put in place. And a lot of people don't even realize it's him doing this work.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, wow, imagine being able to have a trading card and get it signed by Pastor Marcus Davidson or get it signed by Kelvin Watson.
Yeah.
Well, if we create it, we can create that with it. Unfortunately, the passing of Congressman Alcee Hastings recently, who was the first Black judge and then the first Black congressman here. But we had his trading card. He signed it and loved the trading cards. And so when we saw how it was received, we were like, yeah, this is something we need to do on an ongoing basis. And so it really took off. We've been mailing trading cards all over the country. And really, we've sold out so many times. It's like, you know, we're going to start making limited editions. So we made some that are actually out of stainless steel, but with like a brass finish. So we have the Dr. Sistrunk cards. We have the Esther Roll cards. We have just some amazing figures that have come out of Broward County. And we were just like, man, you guys have the opportunity to get some of these cards signed.
Yeah.
And really get to talk to these people in real life. Like, can you imagine having a conversation with Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks? I want them to feel like they can talk to some of these people. They can ask for the autograph and have that icebreaker with them and really get to know, well, how did you get to where you are now? You know, what road did you take? Did you make any mistakes? It's so important for our success to be able to see those paths in front of us, you know?
Yeah, my mind is just going in so many directions. Like, I used to be an expressive arts therapist at a school for youth impacted by homelessness here in San Diego. I helped found
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like a one-of-a-kind school in the United States. And my work was building community and working with youth in the arts. And And one of the things that I always had them do was like go out and choose somebody that was like a mentor and inspiration to them in the community that they wanted to shout out. And we did portraits and things like this. But this, what you're creating is like next level. Like that's just,
well,
just amazing.
It's all in the same vein, right? And you know, success is really the people that you begin placing yourself, you know, around you is so important. And for these kids to be able to ask, you know, a lot of people can provide you resources that you didn't know existed, but you have to get out and you have to ask and you have to have these conversations. And so that's a wonderful way. I'm sorry?
I was just saying it's somebody who could be right down the way from you that you don't even know. Like there's so many resources just right around you. And I think that's the thing that's so beautiful to show young people that who feel like they might be growing up with less than or less opportunities, and just like letting them see the abundance that is around them and the success that they can have access to. But I feel like I totally interrupted you. I got excited.
No. Not at all. Not at all. I feel like I'm talking a little too much, but I'm trying to give you the whole complete story.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting. So as we're like moving through this era with the pandemic and everything, like what's next for you? What are you working on next?
Well, we have a lot. So we right before the pandemic, we did 2 songs with Noah Kebalon here in Fort Lauderdale, and the youth created these 2 songs. We put them out with them, so they got to see the songs being released. They get to see how money's made with music and the behind the scenes aspect of it. We work with some of the youth with AVDA and Milagro in Palm Beach, and so I'm working with them now and signing up for pro rights organizations and actually distribution of their music, and so I can really teach them the behind the scenes financial literacy part of the music business. So we're doing that, and we're just kind of picking up steam simply because we're able to go out a little bit more. We have a little bit more access to the youth, but then we are working on more trading cards. We have some really cool people that we're doing trading cards on. We're doing women's history, and I wanted to have them done in Women's History Month, but we got slowed down, but we're still going to actually do the cards because, I mean, there are some of the most amazing women in our community that I truly admire. And I'm just so gracious for the work that a lot of them do. I mean, some of the things that they can accomplish is just amazing. We have Marcia Pender at Dillard High School, who's one of the winningest coaches in the United States history. She is the girls basketball coach at Dillard High School, and she's been awarded by everybody you can imagine, from Gatorade to just anybody that has to do with sports. And she's right here in our backyard, still winning and still just as feisty as ever. And I just love that about our community. And so she's the reason why we're doing women's history cards, because she's here. So we have those trading cards that we're doing for women's history. We have some trading cards that we're doing for some poets in the community. We're going to be doing hip hop trading cards. We're looking for social warriors and socially conscious people to do those trading cards on. We have quite a few books in the works. We just released our first, I actually have it here, first book by a youth author. It's called Words for Your Walk. And Layla Davidson, she's the daughter of Pastor Marcus Davidson. And she wrote a daily devotional for teen girls because of the pandemic and what it was feeling like. Yeah. And that's that I just find that amazing. She's 15 years old, and the book became a bestseller in 24 hours because of her work with the West Side Gazette newspaper. She writes for them and has been writing for them since she was 13. Right? And so the West Side Gazette is celebrating 50 years, this year's 50 years. Since 1971, they created the West Side Gazette newspaper because of the way Black people were being portrayed in the media. And so we've had this historic newspaper in our backyard. And it's like, you know, how do I say thank you to people that do this type of work? There's really no way to say thank you to them. So I want my work to kind of thank the people in the community. And so the trading cards are huge because I get to say thank you to them a lot of times through the trading cards and some of the other things that we may do. then we have the music. We're working hard on the music, and we even started a clothing line where we got a shirt with Kelvin Watson on it, because he is so instrumental to reading and to our youth. We made a shirt with him on it. We use like caricatures, and they're real funny, but really cool stuff. We have a shirt with Marcus Davidson, Pastor Marcus Davidson on it. I really want to do a lot more with our clothing line and really have people really appreciating where they are and the people that are giving back to them on a day-to-day basis. So there's a lot. I'm sure I'm missing something, but there's a lot.
Wow, very, very cool. And like a theme that I keep hearing is something that you also mentioned is like this idea of paying it forward, like just like being so grateful for like what you've been able to benefit from and making sure you're like passing on to the next person. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's what it is.
Go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say we say positivity pays, and so we even have shirts that say it pays to be positive, and so that's that positive messaging that we're putting out.
Yeah, and I love the little entrepreneurial twist that's on there too, right? Like you could get paid.
Yes.
Right? And that's and that's one of the things I think is so important about working with young people right now is helping them understand like the business side of things. And I love that you're focusing on financial literacy and all that stuff, because that's such a huge piece. So super exciting stuff. One of the things that I usually do towards the end of the talks is I just kind of have like a couple little rapid fire questions that I ask. So these are just like, don't think about it too long and just hop on there. One of the things that has been such a huge theme of the pandemic time, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit, of just that time to really take care of ourselves, right? To like be quiet and kind of introspective. Like when you have an opportunity or you need to take care of yourself, you said something about like, I know I need to create something. What is your go-to when it comes to self-care? Quiet?
Yeah, silence is golden. I need silence. It's so important to me to just, everything is quiet. I need to be able to think for a moment. I find that so valuable, that time that you have with yourself. I feel like that's the time you have with yourself and with God, that you get a moment to either reflect or to understand what's next. And because I build in that way, even with music, sometimes it's just total silence and the idea comes to me and I'm like, thanks God, I'll repay you, right? But it's in that silence that I find those moments to really get out and be creative.
Yeah, I love that. That's how I start every day, is like in quiet and meditation, and in that sort of creation space comes from that. That's amazing. Another thing that I'm really curious about, as someone who works a lot with young people and communities, and doing so much inspirational, creative work, what's something that you really wish educators knew or did differently, just knowing what you know about young people?
Empathy. I think we jump to conclusions so fast sometimes. We don't care what other people may be going through. And I think that happens a lot, unfortunately, with our youth. And one of the things you hear people say all the time, well, where are the parents? I remember, I always think about that because I remember being in a room with the youth that we were working with, and I work with the Department of Juvenile Justice, and I work with kids that have gotten into some pretty serious trouble.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing somebody say something out loud about parents. And then I realized, just looking at the kids' faces that were in the room, just distraught because their parents had just passed. And to hear, like, it still makes me emotional, the thought of that. Like, I'm a grown man. I still have my parents. I still call my parents. I still need my parents to be 13, 14, 15. And you don't know who's going to take care of you.
Right.
Everything is uncertain. And then all you want in this world is your parents. And then here's somebody is saying, well, where's your parents? You know, I mean, that hurt me. And I wish that teachers would understand that some of these kids are going through things that we couldn't imagine as adults. I've seen, you know, sexual abuse survivors, just some really horrific things with some of these kids, and they go to school every day.
Yeah.
No complaints, but they have problems because they don't know how to express themselves, because they don't even understand the language in the way in which we do as adults. They haven't had the opportunity to express themselves. No one has asked them how they feel. Right. And so we're so quick to say something negative about them or to them. We miss everything that's going on with them. And I think that's so unfair to do that to a child. And I honestly wish that a lot of our educators were just more empathetic to what they're going through.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think along with that empathy comes curiosity, right? Like how just understanding, like, kids don't go around and just act like jerks for no reason.
Right.
Like there's a reason. And like, this person is clearly hurting, or like you said, like this child clearly, you know, if they haven't had a role model teaching them how to say how they feel, when it does come out, it's going to come out raw, right? It's going to come out unrefined, you know? Right. And so how do we just bring curiosity, like, oh, how come it's like that? And what is it like for you to be alive? What's your experience like? And that's a lot of the stuff that I do with schools and educators, is really helping them build a community that has care and curiosity and empathy at the heart of it, where we're really building those authentic connections. So I love that you brought that up. And you're not the first person to say that, really wishing that empathy was more present in education.
And I think empathy goes hand in hand with patience, right? And so some things it just comes together. When you're empathetic to what a person's going through, you become more patient with them. So you don't have the frustrated, you know, the moments of frustration and things of that nature. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's like a whole cluster of things that goes along with that. Yeah, for sure. So if folks want to find your music, find your books, find, you know, these trading cards or anything that we've talked about today that's exciting to them, where should they go to find all this good stuff?
So everything pretty much is on positivitypays.com, right? Okay. And so that's our website. We have all the t-shirts, trading cards, books, everything is on there. Any streaming platform, you can find our music. And if you just put in Absoloot, which is ABSOLOOT, if you put that in, you will find pretty much all the music that we've come out with, everything that's recent. And so that's how you can find me. And then on social media, Instagram, it's Team Absoloot. On Twitter, it's just Absoloot. And Facebook, it's Absoloot Music.
All right. So folks, go check it out. There's lots of good stuff. And thank you so much for just sharing everything, your mission with me today. This is really a wonderful talk, and so many great things to think about, and so many great ideas, I think, for people to pick up and implement in different ways in their own communities. And for those of you that are inspired by this conversation, if you want to hear more of these, here on Facebook, I'm at Artful Leadership Coaching and Consulting. And then on Instagram, I'm at Artful Leadership. And then I have all of these interviews are available on YouTube at my YouTube channel, if you look for Rochelle Archer. And there are just so many amazing leaders like Ramon who are doing incredible things for their communities through the arts, education, social justice, all these different wonderful ways. Any last words for folks who are listening?
I'm going to send you that intro music.
Yay, I'm going to have a little beat at the beginning. It's going to be so.
No, you have to keep your head up, and positivity is the way to go, positivity breeds success, and in order to do anything, you have to go in with a positive mindset. And so it's very difficult right now, but we have to rely on each other. I rely on you because you put out positive information, and that's my only way to put out information is through positive allies like yourself. So I greatly appreciate it. I will be continuing to watch. I love the interviews that you do. I love the questions and how you get to the information that we really need. And so I'm grateful for your time and having me on. And I'm a fan now.
Right on. Well, that's mutual. You'll air 5.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm late. Yeah. There we go.
Well, thank you so much. We will be connected in the interwebs, and I really wish you all the best with everything that you're doing. It's just super exciting, wonderful stuff.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.